Hi again, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Charger 360, telling the stories of the University of New Haven. I'm J.W. Stewart, joined as always by Bruce Barber, and our guest today is Dr. Lorenzo Boyd. Lorenzo, it's great to see you. Welcome to Charger 360.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Lorenzo was a guest on the old Dr. Z and J-Dub podcast, so he kind of knows the drill, but you like the new digs here, Lorenzo?
I love what you've done with the space.
It's all Bruce.
I've been up nights thinking, feng shuiing the set. It's been quite difficult.
It's wonderful.
Dr. Lorenzo Boyd is the Stewart Professor of Community Policing here at the University of New Haven. And recently, UNH received a couple of $1 million in federal funding to augment community-based policing efforts in the greater New Haven area with strategies that will specifically target gun violence reduction. So, Lorenzo, tell us a little bit about how this all transpired. Tell us the story of how UNH has come into this federal funding and how much UNH is getting and what it's going to go to.
Well, it started with the Center for Advanced Policing, which is directed by my colleague Lisa Daddio. And she worked with some folks, and we tried to become the Northeast Regional Center for De-escalation. And once we got that designation, she and I wrote a grant to the COPS office for $1 million to train police officers in the Northeast region. Because basically what we know in policing is that we need a lot of de-escalation. We need to bring the temperature down when the police are dealing with community members, particularly communities of color. So now we think we have a great avenue to start doing that. So we're really excited about that. The second grant was an earmark grant that came through our congressional delegation for Connecticut. And we acknowledge that gun violence has been on the rise nationwide, particularly here in New Haven County and specifically the city of New Haven. It's been plagued with gun violence. So we're trying to take a holistic approach to deal with gun violence. We're partnering with the School of Health Sciences, myself, Carl Minguez, Lisa Daddio. There's a few of us that are working on this grant, and we hope to implement it very soon.
And I think the thing that's so exciting, actually, for me about being here at the University of New Haven, and you're a perfect example of this, is that those of you, all of us working in our various fields here, have worked in those fields. And you started as a police officer, actually also as a radio personality. Fun fact, he was on the air in Boston while he was a working police officer.
Really?
I was with the Sheriff's Department. I worked during the day and I did afternoon driving. I did a lot of weekend stuff.
Is that amazing?
I had no idea.
Yes.
What was the name of your show?
Well, I had various shows at various times, but
I'm
I
a
did
radio
21 years of
personality.
radio.
Wow.
I'm a radio personality, and I carry a gun. That's incredible. But you worked in the field, and then you found your way to academia, and we're so happy to have you.
Thank you.
And so talk a little about how you bring that to these bigger issues that you're working on.
A lot of it is perspective based on where I'm from. Growing up in inner city Boston, I've watched versions of law enforcement, whether it's city, state, or county law enforcement, how they interact with people in my neighborhood, specifically communities of color or people that are impoverished communities. I wanted to kind of be the change that I thought should have happened. So going into the Sheriff's Department, I got a chance to spend a lot of time talking to folks in the county jail, talking to people on the street about what's going on. And for me, I then decided I wanted to do something different. So I decided I wanted to go to law school because having a law degree could be cool. And I decided law school was not fun at all. I decided getting a PhD has got to be so much easier. And for me, getting the PhD was really fulfilling. I got to answer a lot of the questions that I had. Never did I want to teach. Never did I think I was replenishing the professoriate. I wanted to go into city planning. I wanted to work for the city of Boston to try to make my community better. And in my last semester at my alma mater, Northeastern University, I taught my first class. And about 6 weeks into the class, I had this epiphany. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And I loved doing it because for me, it was a chance to match research with practice. And I tell students all the time, theories aren't just theories when real lives are involved. So I got to bring a lot of practical application into the classroom. And for the last 22 years, I've been trying to do that.
And you also said that you've had a recent epiphany as well. We were chatting just before we came on the air. Tell us about that and how, as much as you enjoy being in the classroom, of course, your real place you feel is in the community.
Yeah, so I moved a little bit through administration here. I was an assistant provost for a year, and I spent a year as a vice president for diversity, equity, and inclusion, doing what I thought was really important work at the university. But I also realized that my calling is out in the community. It feels to me like being in the community, building bridges between the police and the community, that's a ministry. That's something that I'm supposed to do. And I think there's a situation where if we don't get this right, people die. There are real life implications to doing this. So every single day I've got my hand in policing somehow, and I spend a lot of time talking to community members, and I try to get my students out of the classroom into the community because I want them to be able to make a difference. I tell them, you don't have to fix the system, but be the most ethical charger that you can be, just one person at a time, and that's how we're going to win this.
And I think it's interesting, so discussing your career, this hybrid of communication and policing, and then that leads to academia. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I love about what we do here on campus is we really try to work with students in ways that are interdisciplinary, right?
Yes.
Getting students to think critically and to apply different disciplines. But what I like about the two things that you've been able to combine and now are using it for such good is the knowledge of policing principles, but also those communication skills. And we try to teach that also. We've got, obviously, the Lee College is amazing, but we like our communication department as well. And I feel like when we can combine those, we offer students a whole new tool set.
Absolutely, and it's about how do we talk to people. And particularly, the hardest challenge was post-George Floyd, going into police and teaching cultural competence. And at the time, the police felt like they were kind of, for lack of a better term, under the gun or under the microscope. And going in as an African-American male, as an academic, and as a former law enforcer, it was my job to go in and kind of build a safe space. Mm-hmm. And I would tell officers, in this training, in this classroom is where I want you to make the mistakes. This is where I want you to ask the questions that you thought were not politically correct, or the questions that you don't think you can ask anyone else. In the classroom, I want us to deal with this so that when you face these things out in the street, you're gonna say, oh yeah, Dr. Boyd talked about this, now I better understand the community. I'm doing a lot of work on community trauma and trauma-informed policing, because there are two sides to that, JW, that the police need to understand the trauma that community members are going through. Not only specific trauma, but also vicarious trauma. Because we acknowledge that young people that face trauma, as they grow up, the maturation process is slowed because of the amount of trauma. So as people get older, they don't have the faculties that we think that they should have. And if the police understand that, they know how to better read people. They know that a lot of the responses that they're getting are not personal, but they're trauma-informed responses. And the more you can understand that, the easier it is. But the flip side is a lot of police officers are dealing with their own trauma. Many times it's undiagnosed. Outside of COVID, the #1 killer of police officers is suicide. But we don't talk about that. So the more we can talk with police about trauma, the better they are going to be able to serve the community.
And how have those conversations gone over the last 3 years, especially with police officers and dealing with their own trauma? Because you were a police officer, a law enforcement official at one point in time. I'm going to go out on a limb and say this is something that police officers, generally speaking, are not comfortable talking about.
And it doesn't matter if you're county or state or corrections or federal. Most of the time, it's the way we train our people. Walk it off. You're not supposed to show emotion. And people that are in law enforcement, regardless of what level, probation, parole, you see a lot of stuff that people really shouldn't have to see. And you have to see it over and over and over again. And you still have to, put on a good face and straighten your collar and go out and deal with the rest of the community. And I try to explain to community members, when a police officer shows up, you have no idea the last call that they were on. You have no idea the amount of trauma that they may have faced. And again, I tell police officers, when you're dealing with community members, they're calling you because situations are already out of their control. And we tend to ask very rational questions of very emotional people, and then we get upset when we don't get questions that match our answers. So it's a two-way street.
And our law enforcement officers are really what stands between us and chaos, right? And I think we don't give them enough credit, do we?
You know, that's a popular way to think of it, but most interactions with police aren't dangerous interactions at all. Last year was among one of the safest years for police in a generation. You'd have to go almost back to the Nixon administration to find police officers that were killed at a lower rate. And acknowledging one fallen officer is one too many. We can acknowledge that, but we also need to understand that most people don't want to do the police harm. Most people are trying to live their lives and not deal with the police at all, and when they do deal with them, they want it to be as expeditious as possible.
So in the 3 years since George Floyd died at the hands of police officers, what changes have you seen both on the police side and in the community side and those two sides trying to work together?
The biggest thing is that people are more willing to talk about police reform. It's funny to me that a lot of jurisdictions have passed a law saying that the police have a duty to intervene. The irony is policing, by its very nature, the job is intervention. So to have to make a law, I think, is a little odd. But there's been a lot more conversation about some of the stuff that's going on. And for the first time, we saw en masse police officers coming out testifying against a rogue officer. And one of the things that I've often heard is nobody hates a bad cop as much as a good cop does. So then my follow-up question is always, where are the good cops when bad cops are doing bad stuff? The vast majority of police officers every single day put on a uniform and do a fantastic job. The vast majority of police officers are trying to do the right thing and they have a heart for service. But there are some people that fell through the cracks that got on that probably shouldn't get on, or because of some level of trauma that they have other stuff going on that we need to pay attention to.
And we have just a few more minutes, but so I'd like to bring this back to campus and say, what is the message for our students from our faculty with respect to how we reform the system?
Every single student that comes to Lee College because they already have a mind of service. To get them to understand where they fit in the criminal justice system and to get them to understand that no matter how small their role is, they have a role of making a difference. Ultimately, it's not just about keeping people safe, it's about building a better community. And if we can get the students to understand that we need to leave this community better than we found it, then we're on the right track.
It's a good pitch for potential students and their parents who are watching this program about why they might send their son or daughter here to UNH. I want to get even more specific. If they come to one of your classes, because as you mentioned, you are back in the classroom, a place you're very happy to be in, what are they going to learn in your classroom? What are you trying to teach our students?
They're going to learn policing from a more diverse perspective. Unfortunately, we tend to teach policing from a very Eurocentric perspective. You're going to get a more diverse view of policing. You're going to get a view of policing not only through the eyes of a former enforcer, but through the eyes of a black man that grew up in the inner city. So my view of policing tends to be a little bit different. We come to the same place, and let's acknowledge we haven't changed the way we train police in the last 100 or so years. So you get a more compassionate view of policing if you come into my class.
Last question, because I know we're about a minute left in the program. You mentioned before we sat down that you're writing a book. Tell us about that.
So this is actually my second book. The first book that I wrote was an overview of the Massachusetts criminal justice system that I wrote with a former student of mine, Francesca Spina, and we did it from a historical perspective. This new book, Policing in America, or Policing in the U.S., my co-authors Melissa Morabito and Larry Siegel, we're writing a policing book from a social justice perspective. It's about policing and levels of accountability. We tout policing where it should be, but we hold them accountable in other places. And this is a true and gritty look at policing in America.
Dr. Lorenzo Boyd, the Stewart Professor of Community Policing here at the University of New Haven. Thanks for joining us here on Charger 360. Always great to see you, Lorenzo.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Pleasure.
And that'll wrap up another edition of Charger 360, telling the stories of the University of New Haven. For Dr. Boyd, for Bruce Barber, I'm J.W. Stewart. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.